What happens when one of music's most legendary icons sits down with daytime television's most notorious panel, and everything goes catastrophically wrong? You won't believe what unfolds when decades of pent-up Hollywood frustrations explode in real time on national television. This is the story of how a routine promotional appearance turned into the most explosive confrontation in The View's history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when Cher faces off against the hosts in what can only be described as television warfare. The tension was palpable from the moment Cher walked onto The View's set. What should have been a light-hearted conversation about her new memoir quickly transformed into something far more sinister. The veteran performer, known for her decades of speaking truth to power, had no idea she was walking into what would become the most heated confrontation of her career. At it started innocently enough. Cher settled into the guest chair, her signature confidence radiating as the cameras rolled. The hosts seemed friendly at first, with their practiced smiles and rehearsed banter. Joy Behar opened with what appeared to be a softball question about Cher's legendary career. But there was something in her tone that suggested this wasn't going to be the typical celebrity love fest. "So Cher, you've been in this business for over 5 decades, Joy began, her voice carrying an undertone that immediately put the icon on alert. "You've seen a lot of changes in Hollywood. Tell us about how you've managed to stay relevant all these years." The word relevant hung in the air like a challenge. Cher's eyes narrowed slightly, recognizing the subtle dig embedded in what should have been a compliment. She leaned back in her chair, her decades of experience in handling hostile interviews kicking in. "Well, Joy, I think staying authentic has been key," Cher responded, her voice measured but with an edge. "I've never felt the need to manufacture drama or controversy for attention. My work speaks for itself." The camera caught the brief exchange of glances between the hosts. Whoopi Goldberg shifted uncomfortably in her chair while Sarah Haynes forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sonani host leaned forward, slightly like a predator sensing weakness, and Alyssa Farah Griffin's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Anna Navarro, filling in as the 5th host, decided to escalate things further. "That's interesting, Cher, because some people might say that your recent social media activity has been pretty controversial. You've been quite vocal about certain political figures." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Cher's posture straightened, and those who knew her well would recognize the warning signs. The legendary performer had dealt with decades of attempts to silence her voice, and she wasn't about to start backing down now. "I've always used my platform to speak up for what I believe in," Cher replied, her voice gaining strength. "If that makes some people uncomfortable, that's their problem, not mine." Joy leaned forward aggressively, her facade of politeness beginning to crack. "But don't you think celebrities should stick to entertaining and leave politics to the politicians?" The question was loaded with condescension, and Cher felt the familiar fire building in her chest. She'd heard this tired argument countless times before, usually from people who had never risked their careers or faced death threats for standing up for their beliefs. That's rich coming from a show that built its entire brand on political commentary, Cher shot back, her voice cutting through the studio air like a blade. "But I guess it's only okay when it aligns with certain viewpoints, right?" Whoopi tried to interject, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she reserved for guests who dared to push back. "Now, Cher, we're just trying to have a conversation here. Are we?" Cher challenged, her legendary sass beginning to surface, "because it feels more like an interrogation designed to make me look bad." The hosts exchanged more glances, their coordinated attack becoming increasingly obvious. Sarah Haynes jumped in with what she clearly thought was the knockout punch. "Well, speaking of looking bad, there have been some rumors about your personal life lately. Care to address those?" The studio fell silent except for the hum of the cameras. Cher's eyes flashed with a dangerous combination of hurt and fury. She'd come here to promote her book, to share her story on her own terms, and instead found herself under attack from women who claimed to champion female empowerment. "Excuse me," Cher's voice was deadly quiet, the kind of calm that precedes a storm. "What exactly are you implying?" Sonani host, emboldened by what she perceived as momentum, decided to twist the knife further. We're just saying that for someone who preaches about authenticity, there seem to be a lot of questions about your private relationships and business dealings. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Cher felt the decades of media manipulation, the endless attempts to diminish her accomplishments, and the constant scrutiny of her personal life crystallizing into pure rage. These women sitting behind their desk with their fake smiles and calculated cruelty represented everything she'd been fighting against her entire career. You want to talk about authenticity? Cher's voice was rising now, her famous temper finally unleashed. Let's talk about the authenticity of a show that pretends to support women while systematically tearing them down on national television. The hosts tried to maintain their composure, but cracks were beginning to show. Ana Navarro's face flushed red while Joey's mouth tightened into a thin line. They'd clearly expected Cher to be more compliant, more willing to play their game. "We're not tearing anyone down," Whoopi protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "We're asking legitimate questions." Legitimate questions. Cher laughed bitterly. "You call spreading unsubstantiated rumors and questioning my integrity legitimate journalism. This is exactly the kind of toxic behavior that's destroying meaningful discourse in this country." The studio atmosphere had shifted from uncomfortable to openly hostile. Camera operators adjusted their positions to capture every moment of the unfolding drama, while producers in the control room realized they were witnessing television history in the making. Joy, perhaps feeling the need to reassert control, made a critical error in judgment. "Look, Cher, we understand you're passionate about your beliefs, but maybe it's time to accept that your moment has passed." The words hit Cher like a physical blow. After decades of being told she was too old, too outspoken, too much, she'd reached her breaking point. The mask of professionalism finally slipped completely away, revealing the warrior beneath. "My moment has passed." Cher's voice was trembling with barely contained fury. "I've been breaking barriers and fighting battles while you were still figuring out how to read a teleprompter without sounding like robots." The hosts realized they'd pushed too far, but it was too late to retreat. The damage was done and Cher was just getting started. The confrontation that had been simmering beneath the surface was about to explode into something none of them were prepared for. And the cameras were capturing every devastating second. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the mechanical whir of cameras adjusting their focus to capture the raw emotion playing across Cher's face. Her hands were trembling with rage, her carefully applied makeup doing nothing to hide the fire burning in her eyes. The hosts sat frozen, suddenly aware that they'd cornered a legend who had survived decades in an industry that ate people alive. Sarah Haynes, perhaps thinking she could diffuse the situation, made the mistake of trying to patronize the icon. "Cher, I think we're all getting a little heated here. Maybe we should take a breath." "And don't you dare tell me to take a breath." Cher cut her off, her voice like ice. "You want to sit there and question my relevance, my integrity. Let me tell you something about relevance, sweetheart. I was selling out arenas before you were even born, and I'll be doing it long after this pathetic excuse for journalism is forgotten." Ana Navarro's face contorted with indignation. She leaned forward, her voice dripping with condescension. "There's no need to get personal, Cher. We're professionals here. Professionals." Cher's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You call this professional, ambushing a guest with manufactured controversies and thinly veiled insults. You wouldn't know professionalism if it bit you on your fake-ass personalities." The crude language sent shockwaves through the studio. The View had certainly seen heated exchanges before, but nothing quite like this. Whoopi tried to regain control, her voice taking on that authoritative tone she used when trying to shut down discussions that had gone too far. "Okay, that's enough. We need to keep the civil." Cher whirled on, her eyes blazing. "Where was the civility when you were spreading rumors about my personal life? Where was the civility when you questioned my business dealings without a shred of evidence? You want to play dirty, but you can't handle it when someone fights back." Joy Behar, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment, decided to double down on the attack. "Maybe this is exactly why people are questioning your stability. This kind of outburst doesn't exactly scream professional icon." The words hung in the air like a slap. Cher's mouth dropped open in disbelief before her expression hardened into something truly dangerous. She stood up from her chair, towering over the panel, her presence filling the studio with electric tension. My stability. Her voice was dangerously quiet. Now you want to question my stability. I've survived being blacklisted, death threats, industry, sexism, and decades of people trying to silence me, and you think your little, mean girls club is going to break me. Sunny host, emboldened by what she perceived as solidarity from her co-hosts, made perhaps the most catastrophic decision of the entire confrontation. Well, given your history of dramatic relationships in public meltdowns, it's not exactly unreasonable to stop right there. Cher's voice cut through the studio like a whip crack. Don't you dare bring my relationships into this. Don't you dare pretend like my personal life is fair game for your ratings grab. The mask was completely off now. The legendary performer who had maintained grace under pressure for 5 decades was done playing nice. Her voice rose to a level that made everyone in the studio flinch. You want to know what's unreasonable? What's unreasonable is a group of women who claim to champion female empowerment, spending their time tearing down other women for sport. What's unreasonable is pretending this is journalism when it's nothing but glorified gossip disguised as news. Anna tried one more time to salvage the situation, but her approach only poured gasoline on the fire. Cher, we understand you're upset, but attacking us personally isn't going to attacking you personally. Cher's eyes were wild now, her voice reaching a crescendo that reverberated through the studio. You just spent the last 10 minutes attacking everything about me personally, and now you want to play the victim. The hypocrisy is absolutely staggering. The hosts were starting to panic. This had gone far beyond what they'd planned, and they could see their careers flashing before their eyes. Joy made a desperate attempt to redirect. Look, we're sorry if you feel we were unfair, but if I feel you were unfair, Cher's voice cracked with incredulous rage. There's no if about it. You ambushed me with lies and innuendo, questioned my character without evidence, and now you're gaslighting me by pretending it's all in my head. Whoopi, perhaps, realizing the situation was spiraling completely out of control, tried to invoke her authority as the show's moderator. Cher, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. You're going to ask me. Cher's laugh was harsh and bitter. You're going to ask me to lower my voice after you raised yours to attack me. After you all ganged up on me, like a pack of vultures. The audacity is breathtaking. Sarah Haynes, tears beginning to form in her eyes from the stress of the situation, made one final play. We never meant for this to get so heated. We were just trying to have a conversation. A conversation. Cher's voice was reaching levels that made the sound engineers scramble to adjust their equipment. This wasn't a conversation. This was a coordinated attack designed to humiliate me on national television. And you know what the saddest part is. You probably thought I'd just sit here and take it like some meek little victim. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch that no one in the studio was prepared for. Cher stood there, magnificent in her fury, facing down 5 women who had clearly underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. The air crackled with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Ana Navarro, perhaps realizing that retreat was no longer possible, decided to make one last stand. Well, if you can't handle tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. The words were barely out of her mouth before Cher exploded with a fury that made everything that had come before seem tame by comparison. The legendary icon had reached her absolute breaking point. And what happened next would be talked about for years to come. Can't handle tough questions. Cher's voice erupted like a volcano, shaking the very foundations of the studio. Tough questions. You call spreading lies and manufacturing drama tough questions. You wouldn't know a tough question if it slapped you across your Botoxed faces. The hosts recoiled as if they'd been physically struck. The raw power of Cher's voice, honed by decades of commanding massive audiences, filled every corner of the studio. Camera operators instinctively stepped back while producers in the control room watched in stunned silence as television history unfolded before their eyes. Joy Behar, her face now completely red with a mixture of anger and humiliation, made the fatal mistake of trying to match Cher's energy. Don't you dare talk to us like that. We've been doing this show for years. Years. Cher's laugh was terrifying in its intensity. I've been in this business longer than all of you combined. I was breaking barriers and changing the world while you were still learning how to read cue cards. And you think your little daytime talk show gives you the right to tear me down. Whoopi stood up from her chair, perhaps thinking her physical presence would help assert control. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Cher turned on her with the full force of her legendary presence. Sit your ass back down, Whoopi. You, of all people, should know better. You're supposed to be the voice of reason on this show, but instead, you're just another cog in their mean girl machine. The studio was in complete chaos now. Security personnel were shifting nervously at the edges of the set, unsure whether they should intervene. The hosts looked like deer caught in headlights, their carefully constructed personas crumbling under the weight of Cher's assault. Tsunami host, tears streaming down her face, tried one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Cher, please, we can work this out. We don't have to work this out. Cher's voice reached decibels that threatened to blow out the sound equipment. There's nothing to work out. You showed me exactly who you are the moment I walked through that door. You're nothing but vultures feeding on other people's pain for your pathetic ratings. Sarah Haynes was openly sobbing now, the stress of the confrontation having completely overwhelmed her. Ana Navarro sat frozen in her chair, her face pale with shock at what she had helped unleash. The woman who had made the final comment that triggered Cher's explosion looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. You want to know what tough questions look like? Cher continued, her voice now carrying the weight of decades of accumulated rage. Here's a tough question. How do you sleep at night knowing you make your living destroying other women? Here's another one. What kind of example are you setting for young girls watching this show? Joy tried one more time to interrupt, but Cher silenced her with a look that could have melted steel. I'm not finished. The words echoed through the studio like gunshots. You think, because you sit behind that desk with your fake smiles and your coordinated attacks that you're untouchable. You think you can ambush me and I'll just sit here and take it like some washed-up has-been? Cher moved closer to the desk, her presence absolutely commanding the space. The host shrank back as if facing a force of nature. Let me tell you something about washed-up has-beens. I've sold over 100 million records worldwide. I've won every major award in entertainment. I've used my platform to fight for civil rights, LGBTQ+ rights, and social justice when it was dangerous to do so. What have you done besides tear down women who are better than you? The silence that followed was deafening. Even the crew had stopped, moving, transfixed by the raw power of Cher's words. The legendary performer stood there, magnificent in her fury, having stripped away every pretense and revealed the ugly truth beneath the view's polished surface. Whoopi made one final attempt to regain control. Cher, I think we should know. Cher's voice was deadly quiet now, somehow more terrifying than when she was shouting. You don't get to think anything. You've done enough thinking for one day, and look where it got us. She turned to face the cameras directly addressing the audience that was witnessing this unprecedented moment. To everyone watching at home, this is what happens when fake journalism meets real integrity. This is what happens when mediocrity tries to tear down excellence. And this, she gestured toward the cowering hosts, is what cowardice looks like when it's finally called out. The camera captured every nuance of her expression as she delivered what would become one of the most quoted moments in television history. I came here today to talk about my book, to share my story with people who might find inspiration in it. Instead, I walked into an ambush orchestrated by women who have forgotten what it means to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. Cher began gathering her belongings, her movements deliberate and dignified, despite the chaos she was leaving in her wake. You know what the difference is between me and all of you. She paused, looking directly at each host in turn. I've never had to destroy another woman to feel good about myself. I've never had to spread lies and rumors to stay relevant. And I've never had to hide behind a desk and gang up on someone to feel powerful. Ana Navarro, perhaps realizing this was her last chance to salvage something from the wreckage, made a desperate plea. Cher, wait, we can what? Cher's voice cut through the air like a blade. Pretend this didn't happen. Pretend you didn't just reveal your true characters on national television. The damage is done, ladies. You've shown the world exactly who you are. She stood at the edge of the set, her silhouette framed perfectly by the studio lights, looking every inch the icon she was. I've survived 5 decades in this business by being authentic, by standing up for what I believe in, and by never letting bullies silence my voice. You tried to break me today, but all you did was remind me why I've never backed down from a fight." With that, Cher turned and walked toward the exit, her head held high, her dignity intact despite the chaos behind her. The host sat in stunned silence, their carefully orchestrated ambush having backfired spectacularly. As she reached the studio door, Cher turned back one final time, her voice carrying clearly across the silent set. "Good luck explaining this to your viewers. Good luck explaining how you turned what should have been a celebration of a woman's career into a character assassination. And good luck living with yourselves, knowing that the whole world just watched you reveal who you really are." The door closed behind her with a decisive click, leaving the hosts to sit in the wreckage of what had been their show. The cameras continued rolling, capturing their shocked faces and the toxic atmosphere they had created. What had started as a routine celebrity interview had become a masterclass in how legends are made and reputations are destroyed. Cher had walked into their trap and turned it into their nightmare, leaving the view to face the consequences of their actions. While she emerged victorious, her integrity and legendary status more solid.